This is a clergyman!
Get out of the
What's
way.
wrong with you?
You guys are the
This
ones
is a
playing
clergyman!
games.
Do you understand that? This is a clergyman!
Oh, look at
You
this.
freak!
The actual reason why he was a security threat. Nobody knows that. And the inmates, a few inmates actually called us because they were concerned for Artur. They said he just disappeared. Is he okay? And they said there was no incidents. They were literally doing a Bible study and a prayer group in a circle on their break, in their exercise time.
Yeah.
And that was it. So moving him is very odd, especially the day before the decision from the judge. So we have no idea why they did it. It could have been because of the protest that's occurring outside. But why didn't they do that sooner and not why did they do that the day of?
Yeah.
Basically.
Hey everyone, Adam Soos here for Rebel News with an update on the Pastor Artur Pawlowski story. For those of you unfamiliar with the story, Pastor Artur Pawlowski has been arrested several times, 5 times now, often in SWAT-style arrests, and has faced 3 incarcerations. This latest incarceration now extending to over 45 days. He won't be released until at the very earliest Monday, and that will make it 49 days. An extremely troubling circumstance. All of this stemming, of course, from the fact that he has dared to open his church, preach publicly, and attend protests critical of COVID-19 mandates. The most serious charges, the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act charges, stem from the fact that he went down to the Coutts blockade and preached to the people there. The courts argued that he was largely responsible for what happened down there, which doesn't seem to align with the facts. And on that basis, he was denied bail. That is the basis for his current 47-day or upcoming 47-day incarceration. Extremely troubling stuff. Well, Sarah Miller of JSS Barristers has been working tirelessly to appeal that bail process. This week, under a publication ban, we heard the details of that. And we can't go into too many details, obviously, as I mentioned, because of the publication ban. But ultimately, on Friday this week, the judge ruled that Pastor Artur Pawlowski should be granted bail with a number of strict conditions we won't get into. We'll get into that next week with Sarah Miller to ensure we don't trample on that publication ban or break any rules. But Pastor Artur Pawlowski, on those Critical Infrastructure Defense Act rules and mischief or a conspiracy to encourage mischief, on those matters, those have been basically addressed in court, and he is granted bail. Unfortunately, during his 47-day incarceration, other charges, not as strong charges certainly, stemming from events taking place months ago, were added on to his existing charges. So despite the fact he's been granted bail, he has to clear those other obstacles before he can be released. And that is being discussed hopefully early in the next week by the courts, and everything, if it goes smoothly, he will be released and sent home to his family. We wanted to get a reaction from the family on this little bit of good news for the family anyways, and the potential of Pastor Artur Pawlowski being allowed to go home. So I sat down with Nathaniel Pawlowski for an update.
Well, I'm relieved by this judge's decision, of course. I'm also glad that finally some justice is being served through the justice system. I had lost complete faith in our justice system. So to see that is very relieving. However, it's not a total win because there are extreme conditions, very strict conditions. But overall, I mean, he was granted bail, he was granted release, so we will see him home. Of course, he's got to clear the rest of the charges, but I'm very relieved at this decision.
And for folks maybe out there who aren't familiar, we can just kind of update them. The other charges that are sort of pending and are hopefully going to be dealt with early next week relate to not wearing a mask at a minister copping protest at his house, as well as some other sort of legal charges regarding trespassing, I believe, and not exactly providing complete proof of volunteer hours. Certainly those volunteer hours were done. A number of the other sort of considerations have been cleared up. Those are the only things that are currently pending. Sarah Miller said that she believes there's likely to be success, that there isn't a lot of substance to those sort of allegations. So what do you think is the likely scenario? Are you expecting to see your dad home soon?
Right. Well, first of all, while he was incarcerated, already in jail in the Calgary Remand Center for a number of days or even weeks, a few breach of probation charges suddenly came to the attention of the police and the Crown, and they laid these charges. This is a bit irregular, but not surprising with who my dad is. So the charges, the allegations are completely unfounded. They're not going to stick, and they're very much less serious than the other charges. So normally, what we would see happen is when a higher judge rules for release, the other judge will also rule for release. That's
Right.
what should happen. Or the Crown just backs off and says release as well.
Right.
So we're hoping, being that the charges are minimal and very irregular, to be laid from incidents that occurred months prior, for them to stick. So we're hoping to see him out very soon. This next week, our lawyers are working very hard to have it as soon as possible, and hopefully we will see him out this week.
Another interesting wrinkle for folks who out there aren't familiar, we were confirming that this wasn't indeed under the publication ban, but it does seem to be fairly broadly available information now. Your dad was quite suddenly moved from Calgary Remand to the Edmonton Remand Center, where he is being incarcerated presently. Obviously, there's some conversation about whether this has to do to moving him away from the protests that have been taking place. There are also concerns as far as Sarah Miller, his legal counsel, having access to him. What do you know, or what can you share about his sudden movement to the Edmonton Remand?
Well, we don't know the exact reason. However, from stuff that my dad has shared, he was given a notice already in Edmonton. So first of all, a sheriff or a guard came to him in the Calgary Remand Center and said, "You have a visitor." So he was like, "Okay, well, I have a visitor." So he didn't take any of his stuff or belongings, not his Bible, not his papers, and he goes to what he thought was a visit. And suddenly they just into the paddy wagon, ship him to Red Deer, transfer him in Red Deer into another vehicle, and to Edmonton. It was shocking. So he didn't get to say goodbye to the friends he had made in that unit. I mean, he was getting actually ready for a Bible study and a prayer group with some of the inmates that he had befriended in his unit. So on their, very limited time outside of the cell, he would do stuff with the inmates, Bible study, prayer group, stuff like that. So he didn't even get to say goodbye to some of the friends he made. They just lied to him and shipped him off to Edmonton. And in Edmonton, they gave him a paper that said, basically, you are a security threat to staff or the correctional institute. So for that reason, we have to place you in administrative segregation in the Edmonton Remand Center. We have to transfer you and place you in isolation. And that was actually brought up. And that same day, he was moved to the mental unit, the mentally ill unit. Yeah. So now he's in that unit. He says, I mean, it's significantly better than being in an isolated cell with no window and only 1 hour a day for phone calls, no human contact. That's what he was in for that one day. And he was expecting to be there for at least a minimum of 15 days. But that day they moved him to the I forget, I don't know what it's actually called, but it's the mentally ill ward or unit. And he says at least he has lots of time outside of his cell. He can talk to people, he can interact with people. So he says it's much better. He's not in a freezing cell, isolated. So those are his present conditions. But the actual reason was not stated by anyone. The actual reason why he was a security threat. Nobody knows that. And the inmates, a few inmates actually called us because they were concerned for Arthur. They said he just disappeared. Is he okay? And they said there was no incidents. They were literally doing a Bible study and a prayer group in a circle on their break, in their exercise time. Yeah. And that was it. So moving him is very odd, especially the day before the decision from the judge. So we have no idea why they did it. It could have been because of the protest that's occurring outside. But why didn't they do that sooner and not like why did they do that the day of? Basically.
So if Pastor Artur's already been incarcerated for by Monday, it will be 50 days. 49 days. It seems from the people we've talked to, the legal counsel that we've sought, the worst possible sentencing for all the alleged crimes that your dad has committed. Nominally, as we've said, opening his church, attending protests, preaching, feeding the homeless. Those charges wouldn't amount to the amount of time that's already been served. So there are serious questions here, but for the time being, I guess you can take a win. Hopefully your dad will be home with you. Hopefully you'll get to enjoy his company. Hopefully he'll get to receive some love and care from his family. I'm sure he's looking forward to being out. We want to thank everyone so much for tuning in and continuing to follow this story. As Nathaniel mentioned, this fight is far, far from over, and the Pawlowski family and Pastor Artur are counting on your support to be able to fight back. They wouldn't be able to afford the massive legal bills without your help. If you want to chip in and make a tax-eligible receipt donation, you can do so by going to saveartur.com. All those funds go to the Democracy Fund, and they're used to keep Sarah Miller of JSS Barristers and the legal team working to fight for Pastor Artur's rights. So go to saveartur.com, and as always, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Soos. If you want to help pay for Pastor Artur's legal fees and keep Sarah Miller working for him, you can do so by making a donation that is tax receipt eligible at saveartur.com.